Hello, and welcome to the Poison Paint Factory. My factory designated name is Poison226. Nice to meet you. One day, an emperor will sit, undisputed on his throne. He will rise and fall and watch the universe slip from his grasp. Compliance will be pursued, taken, often unwillingly given. There is temptation in the darkness. There is purity in the calm light. And in the void of one man's soul, these two emotions battle for supremacy. In the same way, just outside his starship, the universe is torn in two. A perfect eclipse illuminates what he has already come to know, and as the solar sails unfurl into the inky blackness, his heart returns. Who is Count Dooku? Why did he turn his back on the Jedi? And what would happen if he'd not sided with the Sith? Today, I want to talk about the Star Wars franchise, more specifically, Count Dooku. Don't let the dark side cloud your vision. Grab a lightsaber, your Jar Jar plushie, and some popcorn. This is going to be a good one. May the Force be with you. Disclaimer: a lot of the information presented in this video is public information that I researched alongside my interpretation and opinions. Sources will be linked in the description, and yes, there will be spoilers. So, with all that said, let's get to it. Before we get into the Dooku stuff, let's talk about the universe he comes from. To no one's surprise, it's Star Wars. Star Wars is referred to as an epic space opera, which, broken down to simple terms, means sci-fi heavily revolving around space, galactic wars, and adventure. But I believe samurai western in space is a better way of explaining the feel of it, but I'm just simple like that. Plot-wise, without getting too deep into it, there's a galactic war with the Jedi as the good guys and the Sith as their evil equivalent. The Jedi work with the Galactic Republic, Rebel Alliance, and the Resistance to maintain peace across the galaxy, or to overthrow an evil dictator, whereas the Sith work for the Separatists, Galactic Empire, and First Order to glean power and control the populace for their own gain. Oh yeah, and there's a lot of talk of a chosen one who will bring balance to the Force. George Lucas started writing the screenplay for the first Star Wars movie, A New Hope, between 1973 and 1974, after becoming inspired by the films Flash Gordon and The Planet of the Apes. That's a mashup I'd love to see. Throw in a little samurai inspiration from one of his favourite directors, Akira Kurosawa, and he knew he was onto something special, even if Hollywood didn't realise it yet. The film was turned down by every studio he took the pitch to, except one. Famously, Lucas agreed to forego his directing salary in exchange for 40% of the film's box office take and all merchandising rights. Ever wonder why there's so much Star Wars merch? Now you know. The movie went on to smash box office records and earned 7 Academy Awards, including Best Original Score and Best Visual Effects. After the success of the first film, he wrote but didn't direct the next 2 films in the series, The Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi, which concluded the story. Or did it? With Luke going from simple moisture farmer in the first film, fighting against the odds to defeat the evil Empire, saving the princess, fulfilling his destiny and becoming a Jedi Knight, to fighting and defeating his father Darth Vader and liberating the galaxy from the corrupted grip of the Emperor, well, what more could be said when it ended on such a high note? Before we start talking of prequels, George started tinkering with the original movies to commemorate their 20th anniversary, creating a special edition remaster of all 3 films in 1997. This included, but was not limited to, adding new visual effects and scenes to tie them more in line with his new vision, and being used as a trial run for his more CGI-heavy movies to come. He didn't stop at making changes here though. Some changes have been made to the films as recently as 2019. Lucas wrote and directed the next 3 films, The Phantom Menace, Attack of the Clones, and Revenge of the Sith, which all centered around Anakin Skywalker, his rise as a Padawan, and fall to the dark side, becoming Darth Vader.
You were the chosen one!
Just like the original trilogy, there were many TV series that spun off from the prequels, which kept Star Wars in the public eye, and opened up the story, setting, and characters beyond the films. But it wasn't only TV series that helped bring the greater universe to life, but a slew of books, graphic novels, and video games too. No, I'm not going into specifics or I'll end up upsetting the supervisor again with another long video. Needless to say, if the movies weren't enough to sate your thirst for Luke, Obi-Wan and Darth Vader and pals, there is enough media to keep you out of mischief, at least for a while. People thought the franchise was done after the prequels concluded. Once again, the story had been resolved with Episode 3 meeting the continuity of the 4th. But then, in 2012, George Lucas sold his production company, Lucasfilms, to Disney Corporation for $4 billion, and it all began again. After this acquisition by the House of Mouse, a sequel trilogy was made, The Force Awakens, The Last Jedi, and The Rise of Skywalker respectively. The first and last were directed by J.J. Abrams, and The Last Jedi by Rian Johnson. Lucas didn't write Episode 7 and 9, but co-wrote Episode 8 alongside Johnson. There were 2 other feature-length films that came out after the acquisition, which were Rogue One and Solo, and a steady stream of TV shows which don't seem to be letting up anytime soon. The Count looks like this.
You'll know that I am called the Count, because I really love to...
No, wrong video. It's the other button. Take 2. He looks like this, or this, and sometimes like this. He first appeared in Star Wars Attack of the Clones as the main antagonist, leader of the Separatists, and a corrupted Jedi. But what's his story? Born to a wealthy and powerful family on the planet Sereno, he would be bestowed the title of Count Dooku due to his lineage. As a young child, he showed promise with the powers of the Force, and was taken by the Jedi and became apprenticed to Thame Cerulean. After becoming a Jedi, he trained Qui-Gon Jinn as his Padawan, and later Kamari Vosa. For nearly 70 years, Dooku was well respected and an expert instructor within the Jedi Temple, but probably more famously as a lightsaber master, with only Masters Yoda and Windu who could outbattle him. Unfortunately, Mandalorian on Mandalorian violence had broken out on the planet of Galadran, and the Jedi, led by Dooku, became embroiled in the conflict, sustaining heavy casualties and wiping out all but one of the Mandalorians, Jango Fett. This botched operation caused Dooku to consider if the Jedi were a righteous force in the galaxy, or were they dogmatic and arrogant. In the end, Dooku left the Jedi Order with his faith shattered, and fell under the influence of Supreme Chancellor Palpatine, who he found out was actually Darth Sidious. After the death of Darth Maul at the hands of Obi-Wan, Dooku became Maul's replacement as Darth Sidious's new apprentice, taking on the mantle of Darth Tyrannus. Dooku wouldn't make it known that he'd become a Sith, but would go on to become the political leader of the Confederacy, aka the Separatists, going against the Republic. It wasn't just Dooku who felt the dark side's pull, but one of his former Padawans, Kumari Vosa. After her banishment from the Jedi Order, she amassed a cult of followers, and through criminal means held a genuine threat to topple the Republic and get revenge on the Jedi who had disowned her. Due to her growing strength, she became a target for Palpatine, who was attempting to take the Republic from within. She was deemed too dangerous to live, and Dooku was instructed to kill her. Dooku, unwilling to kill his star pupil, decided to put a bounty on her head instead. This killed two birds with one stone, as anyone powerful enough to defeat her would be the ideal candidate for his clone army plan on Kamino. It was Jango Fett who defeated Vosa after a lengthy hunt, but chose to spare her life in the end. This was her death warrant, as seconds later she sensed her old master and died, choking to death by Force grip. Enter Darth Tyrannus from the shadows. Fett was paid his 5 million credits, and the offer of more if he agreed to be cloned on Kamino. He agreed after his own stipulations were met, a clone without any modifications, for accelerated growth and obedience. This was to become his son, Boba. The clones were an important part of the Attack of the Clones film, obviously, with Obi-Wan trying to discover who had sanctioned them and for what purpose. They were used by the Jedi in the Battle of Geonosis against the droid army of the Separatists, culminating in the first battle of the Clone Wars and the unveiling of Dooku as a Sith. After a lengthy campaign, the Count was cornered on the Separatist command ship, the Invisible Hand, over Coruscant. Chancellor Palpatine had allowed himself to be captured by the Separatists, drawing Anakin Skywalker and Obi-Wan Kenobi into his trap. Dooku was defeated by Anakin in a climactic lightsaber battle and condemned to die by Palpatine to allow him a new apprentice. One far younger and more powerful. Was Count Dooku a Sith? Well, in name he was, but in principles, maybe not. He wanted change in the galaxy, and siding with the Sith seemed like the only way to bring about it. Maybe it's that soft spot I have for the character, but if the Sith had succeeded and he hadn't lost his head, well, Dooku could have overthrown Palpatine and brought about change sooner, possibly for the better. Count Dooku was portrayed in the movies by Christopher Lee, with additional stunts performed by Kyle Rowling. As for the spin-off series and games, Dooku was voiced by Corey Burton, with the only exception being the Clone Wars animated film in 2008, in which Lee reprised his role. You may know Corey Burton as the voice of Cad Bane or Zero the Hutt. If not, you'll have definitely heard his voice in one of the many Disney, DC, Transformer or Crash Bandicoot properties. Sir Christopher Frank Carradine Lee was born on 27th of May 1922 in London, England, and was featured in almost 300 movies and games during his career. To some, he was the devilish Dracula in the Hammer horror movies of the late 1950s, 60s and 70s. He actually portrayed the titular character in 7 of the 9 Dracula movies. If not Dracula, you might know him as Francisco Scaramanga, the villain from the James Bond film, The Man with the Golden Gun. Perhaps you are a little too young to remember these films. The Wicker Man? No, not the Nicolas Cage one. The original. How about Saruman the White from the Peter Jackson Lord of the Rings movies? Count Dooku? Obviously. Or perhaps one of his many roles in Tim Burton films. I thought you'd recognise his iconic look and signature baritone voice. Starting off with random fact number 1, his mother was an Italian countess, and through her he was related to the Emperor Charlemagne of the Roman Empire, and was also related to Robert E. Lee, who was the famous Confederate general. Anyway, back to the story of Christopher Lee. He didn't start his career in film though. He actually started his working life as an office clerk for a London shipping company until 1941, when he enlisted in the Royal Air Force during World War II. At this time, he was refused to fly due to a problem with his optic nerve. So, he became an intelligence officer instead with the Long Range Desert Patrol. this being pre-SAS, aka the British Special Forces. The man literally fought Nazis, helped retake Sicily, and prevented a mutiny among his troops. During the war, he graduated from LRDP to SOE. The missions undertaken are still classified, involving, but not limited to, espionage, sabotage, and reconnaissance in occupied Europe. He never spoke of his time with the SOE, but is quoted as saying, "I've seen many men die right in front of me. So many, in fact, that I've become almost hardened to it. Having seen the worst that human beings can do to each other, you develop a kind of shell, but you had to." When the war had ended, he received commendations for bravery from the British, Polish, Czech and Yugoslavian governments. Wrapping up his pre-acting era, after World War II, he worked with the Central Registry of War Criminals and Security Suspects, hunting Nazis. In 1947, he joined the Rank Organisation, where he trained as an actor. This is where he started his journey to stardom, but it wasn't easy. Early in his acting career, he was discriminated against due to being too tall. He was 6'5" and being too foreign looking. Interestingly, it was these same issues that plagued fellow Englishman Boris Karloff in the 1930s, until he broke through with his role in Frankenstein. Funnily enough, it was the same role of the monster in The Curse of Frankenstein that broke Lee into the mainstream too. After this, he would be featured in many Hammer movies, alongside Peter Cushing's, with the two becoming good friends. You could say the two were synonymous with them appearing in these movies together. Charlemagne Productions was Lee's own production company, which produced the films Nothing But the Night and possibly To the Devil a Daughter. The latter may not be a true production and wrongly credited about the internet, as Lee championed the novel, preventing it from being shelved by Hammer as a TV series and helping inspire them to make it a feature-length film instead. On Dracula, I stopped appearing as Dracula in 1972 because, in my opinion, the presentation of the character had deteriorated to such an extent, particularly bringing him into the contemporary day and age, that it really no longer had any meaning. After playing the part of Count Dracula for Hammer for many years and seeing the rapid decline in the property, he quit Hammer, but the studio executives emotionally blackmailed him. He returned to the role of Dracula in the film Dracula Prince of Darkness, but refused to say a word of dialogue, as he believed the script was that bad he reduced his dialogue, if you can call it that, to hisses and screams. At this point in his career, Lee wanted to cast off his tired horror image and try something different.
And now for something completely different.
The something being the more mainstream appeal of The Private Life of Sherlock Holmes, The Three Musketeers, The Four Musketeers, and the James Bond film The Man with the Golden Gun. Speaking of James Bond, Lee was not only related to the Arthur Ian Fleming, but he was actually one of Fleming's first choices for the role of Bond. So in an alternate universe out there, we could have had a Christopher Lee James Bond movie. He might not be in horror films anymore, but he was still firmly typecast as the villain. But then, when you're good at being bad, why be anything else? With the new millennium, Lee relaunched his career playing the iconic villains Count Dooku and Saruman at the age of 79. Funnily enough, Lee was a huge Tolkien fan who was actually the only member of the movie cast to meet Tolkien personally, by accident, in a pub. Tolkien actually gave Lee his blessing to play Gandalf in any future Lord of the Rings movie. He got Saruman, but that's close enough. Also, when Lee heard there was to be a Hollywood adaptation, he accepted the role of a wizard in the TV series The New Adventures of Robin Hood, so he could prove that he could play the part. He even went as far as sending Peter Jackson a letter asking to be in the film, along with a picture of him dressed up as a wizard. Dooku and Saruman are arguably two of his best performances in a lifelong career of great performances. Speaking of great performances, he won many awards including the much coveted BAFTA Fellowship and the BFI Fellowship Awards for his outstanding work. He was featured in the In Memoriam segment at the 2016 Oscars, but he unfortunately never received an Oscar himself. Not only did he receive awards for his acting, but he also received the Bram Stoker Award for Lifetime Achievement, appointed a Commander of the Venerable Order of St. John, appointed a Commander of the Order of the British Empire for services to drama, Royal Mail commemorative postage stamp as his role as Count Dracula, received a knighthood for his services to drama and charity by Prince Charles, Spirit of Hammer Award at the Metal Hammer Golden Gods Awards for his contribution to the metal genre. Christopher Lee released an operatic metal album called Charlemagne by the Sword and the Cross at the age of 88. He also released a metal Christmas album in 2012. He was the oldest metal performer and the oldest musician to ever hit the Billboard music charts. The French government made him a Commander of the Order of Arts and Letters. The Bram Stoker Gold Medal by the Trinity College Philosophical Society, and honoured with a tribute by University College Dublin, which he described as, in some ways, as special as the Oscars. He is in the Guinness Book of World Records for the most screen credits in 2007, the record for the tallest leading actor, and starring in the most films with a sword fight, with 17. I'm not sure where else to put this, but I guess it's an achievement of sorts. In the 50s, he was engaged to the daughter of Count Fritz von Rosen. Apparently, the Count didn't like him and also refused to allow his daughter to marry him unless Lee got the blessing of the King of Sweden, which somehow he got. As a man of many talents, he was also a world champion fencer, an opera singer, spoke 6 languages, and was supposedly pretty handy around a golf course too. Christopher Lee passed away on the 7th of June 2015 after being admitted for respiratory problems and heart failure shortly after celebrating his 93rd birthday. A person's last words are their legacy, and Christopher Lee's last performance for the film Angels of Notting Hill, his last words were,
"I will dream of you. Have a good life, Jeffrey. Don't dare, or I'll haunt your dreams."
But I believe the greatest send-off he could give himself were his final words at the 2011 BAFTA award ceremony, speaking of his view from the podium of all the talented people who were watching him accept the award.
And I would like to say, my God, that this is without a doubt the finest image I've ever had. Thank you.
Before we get into the alternate reality, how do you think this video connects with the last? What does Dooku have in common with Dracula? What if Count Dooku never joined the dark side? Well, if he hadn't left the Jedi Order, he wouldn't have been told to kill Kamari Vosa by Darth Sidious. He wouldn't have put a bounty on her head, he wouldn't have had Jango Fett cloned, and the Clone Wars wouldn't have happened. Big changes. So, what would have happened? Well, being someone who was born a Count, he would like the idea of power, so a prominent position on the Jedi Council would be one of his goals. Say this goal was met, he would want to be seen as heroic and courageous. So, as with his advanced age, his health declines and his powers are at their peak, he might try and take it upon himself to unveil the elusive Sith Lord. At some point, I believe, Palpatine would hear of Dooku and his goal, and seeing this as arrogance and something to be manipulated, Palpatine would expose himself as the Sith Lord Darth Sidious.
It's me!
Dooku.
Oh, son of a... What? It's me!
Dooku.
It was me all along!
Dooku.
And offer the Count unlimited power. But this time the Count would be unfazed. He doesn't need more power, he needs to bring the galaxy to peace. Dooku was a great tactician, so again, assuming the Padawan Kamari Vosa hadn't turned to the dark side, they would work together to outmatch the Sith Lord. It wouldn't be easy, but considering their combined powers, it could be possible. With the Sith Lord defeated, the galaxy would be brought to some semblance of peace. Dooku would be elevated in position within the Jedi Council, and a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away, there would be peace. And so, with all that said, thank you for your time. I wish you a good day and many more besides. Yours, forever in horror, 226.
Masters,
226.
there are too many.
Unpainted minis.
What are we going to do?